And we're off and running late night. That's right, 10 p.m. on the West Coast. That means it's 1 a.m. on the East Coast. I know my time zones. Welcome to the Krug Show, brought to you by Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. Check them out in Emeryville and Corte Madera. They're open 7 days a week from 11 a.m. till 8 p.m. or until they run out. And it's a real barbecue spot, so they actually do run out. We're also brought to you by Marin Autoglass, marinautoglass.com, Underdog Fantasy. Check that link in the description. Use the promo code KRUG, K-R-U-E-G, and they will match you up to your first $100. And we're also brought to you by Sharp Corner Sports Cards and Collectibles down in the Monterey Peninsula. Check them out. Give Anthony Catania a call. He's at 831-521-5264. They're on 205 Cypress Avenue in Pacific Grove. And they've got a great event every first Friday of every month through the hot months, May, June, July, August, and September, where they have free food and people come out, and it's a great event. So give Anthony Catania a call, and he'll tell you all about it. But with us tonight, as we go late night, is Ethan Sherwood Strauss, who's one of my favorites. We had him on. We talked a little bit about my career. It was probably the most embarrassing segment I think I've done, because I think there was at one point in the exchange where I talked for something close to 14 straight minutes. Even my kid was like, "Dad, you talk for like 15 minutes in a row." And I'm like, "Yeah, I know. I got a little me-centric there." So we start this stream with the apology for talking for 15 minutes uninterrupted. Ethan, how are you, man?
Nobody goes to the Pavarotti concert and complains that, oh my God, that guy just kept singing. You are a Bay Area radio legend. You are a YouTube legend. I don't think there's any reason to have any issue with you talking. That is the idea of you coming on. I do have one issue though, which is that I'm in my kid's playroom and you are in this spiffy studio, and I'm feeling the contrast. You look like you're on the Joe Rogan Experience. You've got a setup, and I'm in a tiny chair, Larry. So that is the one thing. I just wish that you had somehow matched my energy here at 10 p.m. on the West Coast. But in all seriousness, very happy to be on.
Oh man, I'm so thrilled to have you. And it's funny because, I want to talk to you about football and basketball. You're kind of, in that mode of like basketball is kind of the work and football is kind of the fun. And I know that that mindset. So you're probably more eager to talk football. And as we were joking before the show, we can mix it up. We can talk Niners. We'll go red. We can talk about the Giants game that just ended. Hey, go Giants. We can talk about the A's moving to wherever, or we could start with the Warriors. But I actually wanted to start with the Warriors, and then we'll get into the Niners. And there's some great stuff on Aiyuk. And Bill Barnwell's got an amazing trade that I think that we need to discuss. And I'm a big fan of Barnwell. I don't know how well you know Barnwell, but let's start with the Warriors. I went on with Grant Napier and Jerry Reynolds the other night, the night before that game, the playoff game with the Kings. They were really nervous because the Kings weren't playing well. The Kings don't have much of a bench. They lost Herder. They lost Malik Monk. They weren't playing well. They had just gotten their doors blown off by the Blazers. The Warriors had, on paper, were looking great. They win on the road. They've won 9 of 11. Steve Kerr's talking about deep playoff runs, and Kerr, the Warriors obviously spanked the Kings on their home floor in Game 7 last year in the playoffs. So that was fresh in everybody's minds. And Jerry Reynolds and Grant Napier were both kind of like, I don't know. I'm not really sure. And then they said, what do you think? And I said, you know what? I think you got to be really, really current on the Warriors to see what I see. And I watched Warriors Pelicans, and I saw Steph roll that ankle, and I saw Steph looking tired, and he's looked tired for a month. And I know Klay Thompson's played well, but I knew his emotions were fragile. I thought, you know what? Klay's going to shoot him out. I knew Steve Kerr was going to flinch when it came to his rotations. He did with Trace Jackson Davis. He benched him after only 11 minutes. And I said, guys, Sacramento's winning this game, and they're moving on because They've got more guys in their prime, and Golden State's got one guy on the whole team, Wiggins, who you can't bank on in his prime. Everybody else is too old, too young, too this, too that. And I said, take Sacramento. They're going to win this game. I didn't see how they would do it in the second quarter. I was nervous because the Kings had no bench scoring. But what do you think? I mean, now the Warriors are done, and man, I mean, the talk about the offseason is here, and it's like, it's scary. It's scary what's coming for Golden State. Did we see the end of the dynasty at Golden One?
It's a funny thing, this talk of the dynasty. I guess we're just talking about the core and the people who were a part of the dynasty. And it's a weird circumstance. We're talking NFL and NBA, and I feel as though people sometimes get into this NFL mentality when they're thinking about NBA rebuilding, because you can do it quick in the NFL. You have a good draft. It doesn't even really matter maybe what position you have in the first round, and you can totally remake your team in one offseason and fully rebuild, as they were showing the Patriots did in the middle when they had to completely retool and they had the double tight end look and they completely changed their direction. NBA is not that easy. You just can't turn it around instantly. And so the way I look at it is this: there's this impulse. A lot of fans, they feel bad about what happened and they feel like we got to blow it up. We got to change everything. They're not really in the position to do it. And I feel like there's some bad news and some good news right here. When we talk about the dynasty, they are obviously very far away from what they were. But the good news is that they're actually not that far away from being around contention. And my argument for that is that the league at the top tier has gotten worse. I mean, if you look back at 2016, right? The 73-win Warriors season, the top tier of the league just looked a lot scarier than the top tier right now. Right now, it's the Nuggets. The Nuggets are scary. That is the prohibitive favorite. And, but that's one team. Murray doesn't keep himself into shape. He rolls an ankle. You never know, but they're the best team. The Celtics, they're killing it with the point differential, but nobody really trusts them. You look back at 2016, obviously the Warriors had 73 wins. The Cavs roster totally stacked. The Kawhi Spurs, 67 wins. The Thunder that nearly beat the Warriors, incredible team. And sorry about that. Bit of a cough. And obviously the Clippers, Lob City, they never got there, but they were very talented. So, I just don't see the NBA like that. I think what happened is that a lot of the old guard from that era has hung on, just took care of their bodies better. And the young guys, the Americans, didn't really fill the void. The European guys kind of came in. So they don't have to really do that much to get themselves back in 2022, maybe a steal one mode. And so I think that's the positive. And it should just, now I'm monologuing, now I should apologize, but I think you just want to simplify it. They need somebody who can play make and augment Curry on offense. And then defensively, maybe add a guy or two. I think I would probably look seriously at trading Kuminga, because I believe he has more value as an asset to people than he has value on the Warriors in their system. He scores efficiently. He looks like a defensive monster, but he has not been that for them. So if you can somehow flip Kuminga, a dream scenario, a DeJounte Murray, I don't think you have to do all that much necessarily to get back on the periphery and just maybe, if things go right, be able to steal one. And that's the mode they should be in until, I guess, the next 2 years. I'm looking at this as a 2-year window. How do you get back? How do you get into that top 4? And I think it's possible. I really think it is.
It's interesting. The traveling Urquides here says Draymond's show hinted at the fact that maybe they're all coming back. He made that, revelation. I don't know if it's up to him, but I mean, is Klay Thompson back? I mean, are they just going to let him go? It seems he's such a weird guy at this point, in that they offered him $48 million. He turned it down. He's not worth $48 million. So that to me seems like an impasse. Are they going to do they have to dramatically overpay Klay Thompson to come back and continue to decline? That just is that
No.
is that a move you think they're going to make, or do you think he's moving on?
I mean, I think in their last 2 elimination games, he might have been 3-19 in that Laker game. And that one was a winnable game. And those shots were open. And then he goes over in this last elimination game. And I think the conversation with Klay has to be very simple. It has to be, okay, look, we can talk about a lot of things. We want you here. We want you here. You put up some good numbers. You have value as a shooter. We want you to come back. You mean a lot to this franchise. But the one conversation that we are not going to have is about money. We're going to give you a number. You might not be happy with that number. You might not be happy with it. But we have paid you an insane amount of money to this point. And it was after the injuries. We made you whole. We made you right. What did Draymond say? That maybe they paid him $160 million? It was something crazy that they gave to Klay Thompson. And so we have given you that. That is our goodwill. Now, I know Kawakami floated maybe 2 years, 20 million. I might even go lower and go, look, we're going to give you a number, and there's not going to be any negotiating about it. This is, you take it, you want to be here because we have paid you so much, and you get to take your boat into the games and do everything you like to do. Or maybe you want to go to Orlando. And even though you don't, I think, have a bunch of kids, and I don't believe are married unless there's some update in his life that I haven't heard, it's more important to be making more money on the Orlando Magic or wherever. And if that's the case, and if that's what you want, then bygones be bygones. We'll retire your number, and there's tons of goodwill. But this is a situation where we don't necessarily need you. We just don't. I mean, they need to fill that role. They need to give more minutes to Moody if he's going to be here. They need more of a role for Pods. So I think that's just a simple conversation. It's a situation where you'd like to have him here, but this isn't a situation where you've got to negotiate and go back and forth. You've made him whole. You've paid him a ton of money. It's time for him to show whether he can be part of the organization, because one of the things that made the Spurs, people talk about the Spurs. Oh my God, they did it for 20 years. It was guys taking pay cuts. Tim Duncan took pay cuts. Those guys took less money than they would get elsewhere. Maybe he's not willing to do it, but that's what keeps the core together. That's what gets it done.
And that's playing hardball. I mean, that's playing financial hardball. How about Green? I mean, Kerr said, hey, I love Green and I love him as a person. And I know he's flawed, and he's more flawed than most. But, I love him. And, if we didn't think it was valuable to have him, we would have moved on. And he talked about what a great person he is. What do you think? Is he back, or is he moving on? Because, I mean, they signed him and they could trade him. Seems to me that LeBron might want him. I was looking at the trade machine. You could trade him to the Lakers for and I don't know if the Lakers would do this, but Jackson Hayes, Rui Hachimura, and the back of the big point guard from Indiana. You could take that back for Draymond, and that works financially. What do you think? Do they move him on to the Lakers or Pistons or some team that may see some upside in Draymond, or do they bring Draymond back?
Well, I think you've got to obviously explore everything. I don't love the idea of trading him because I just think he's forever undervalued. Defense is half the game. And for whatever reason, we don't act like it is. Draymond, the dirty secret about him is he's still really good. He's still really good. He is maddening. He is annoying. Everybody figured he would have been washed up by now, by the way. That's something that's not talked about often. It is crazy that Draymond has outlasted Klay. Everybody said Klay was the one he could play forever and still be Klay. Obviously, he had the injuries. Draymond, I mean, that guy...
He's kept his legs in shape.
And, I mean, he's somebody who's got a rep for being a bit of a hard-living guy. And it's funny, I just had Bogut on my podcast. He was saying maybe something that's helping Draymond is that he's podcasting after these games, and that keeps you out of the nightclubs. It keeps you out of Harrah's when you're on the road in New Orleans. Maybe this has been a big help in that way. But I just think he's so good. He's really good. He still guards all the positions. He still stones people at the rim. He's starting to hit threes with more regularity. So I know there's this emotional want to move on from him and just get away from this whole situation. But I just think he's somebody who's going to have more value to the Warriors than he would have elsewhere. So if I can just hold on, I look at it as Steve has 2 more years here. Can Draymond be here for 2 more years, not get himself suspended from a playoffs? I think it's just somebody you probably are going to have to retain if you want to get into that zone of, can we steal one? Can we do something like 2022 with Steph still here? As annoying as it is, I think he's just somebody you're going to have to live with.
I was going to ask you, do the Warriors go to the finish line with Steph? But it's really, does Steph go to the finish line with the Warriors? I think it's his call.
Yes.
I don't know Steph. I mean, I've talked to Steph. I've interviewed Steph. He seems like a guy who didn't want to be here in the Bay Area when he came out of Davidson, and now maybe doesn't want to leave. Because now this is home, and but he does have a gigantic home in Southern California. So it's not like, and I'm sure there are people that would love to see Steph Curry, in the league office, finish at the Garden with the Knicks. Do the Warriors go to the finish line with Steph? And I guess the question is, do you think Steph would rather compete for a title somewhere else, or maybe stay here and never get that chance again?
Yeah, this is the tricky thing when somebody is at the level that he's at and the tier of superstar that he is, because I know there are these historic examples of NBA rebuilding when you get to the end like this. And the Celtics blew it up with that KG core. They got a ton from the Nets.
Pierce.
They successfully did it, but those guys weren't at the level of Steph Curry. And when Sam Presti blew it up, those guys that he flipped were not at the level of Steph. When the guys are at a little bit of a lower level, you can play that game of trading them and having it be a surprise. If you're trading Steph, that's coming with his explicit consent. It's probably coming with him specifically wanting to go to a particular place. And then you can't really have somebody over a barrel and leverage them out of 5 first-round picks. So I think it's a situation where he might want to go to a place like Miami. That might be very intriguing to him. But are you really going to get a ton out of the Heat? And do you really trust that the Heat are ever going to really be bad to convey some draft picks to you that are going to do something for you? So I think all options are being explored right now. It wouldn't shock me if he's losing his patience, but I just have to go with thinking that he would play it out here while he's still good, and that they would still want to keep him, because I think when you're at the level of a Magic Johnson, Michael Jordan, that kind of level, you just can't really flip a guy for all that you want unless he makes a demand, which that doesn't really seem like Steph Curry and how he goes about things.
Ethan Strauss with us. We're talking Warriors. We're going to get into some Niners with Ethan as well, because Ethan's a big Niner fan and the draft's coming up. But I got a few more on Golden State, and I think they're really, the end of this season provides lots of questions. And there are a lot of Warrior fans, and they really, really love you, Ethan, and they believe in your kind of wisdom, and they want to hear your perspective on this. So, and we'll turn several of these answers into videos that we'll put out in the next couple of days, and people will really want to hear your perspective on all these questions. The other one that keeps coming up is that Steph is Batman and he needs a new Robin. And there's all kinds of people saying, hey, it's Karl Anthony Towns, and it's Paul Pierce, or not Paul Pierce, it's Paul George. I've heard PG, coming here. And do you believe that Steph needs that second player? And who are some examples of guys that you think potentially could be had to be, the Robin to Steph Curry's Batman?
Yeah, I think he needs it. I don't necessarily believe that it has to be a guy who's superstar tier. I think it's somebody to just take some of the burden and the creation off of him. I don't really Karl Anthony Towns, I don't think that's exactly what you're looking for. You're looking for a perimeter guy to help with that. And I think Pajemski, as he grows, is helping in that respect. But you need a little bit more. I mean, he's just getting blitzed. Yeah, Giannis. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, you get Giannis. That'll be that. Yeah, yeah. That's
Bingo. Can I get a side of Giannis
yes, that
coming
would
this
be
way?
nice. That would be cool. I'd be in favor of it. I mean, the cap situation is complicated. I named Murray as a guy with the Hawks because the ownership seems to love Trae Young. I don't, but they seem to. They seem to love Trae Young. So could you flip Kuminga maybe with more stuff to do that? It's complicated when it comes to matching salaries in the second apron. I would have to pull out the abacus and figure out whether or not such a thing is possible. But that's a guy where I would go, okay, I think you would be over the moon as that if that was at all possible. So I think you just want to really simplify it. I think that's the main big thing that they need is help for Steph offensively on the perimeter because he's just doing too much. And even when all of these guys are playing to their fullest capacity, they're not helping him out with that stuff. And that's just what you need. So if you can get that, then all of a sudden maybe you're back in that top 4 range. You're not the Denver Nuggets. You're not going to be at the Nuggets level, but you're back in a more comfortable place. I think they might have had the 4th best point differential this season. I think when you finish 10th place in this whole weird setup where it's all bunched together and it happens so miserably and you get blown out, you can lose sight of it. But I would emphasize the following: totally far away from their dynasty days, completely so far away from it, but oddly not as far from the top of the heap in the Western Conference, at least, until the Oklahoma City Thunder figure out their raft of assets and young players and everything, but still within striking distance. So yeah, just try to get that guy. It's easier said than done, but that's got to be the first order of business to get Steph help offensively.
And maybe the impetus being to play Steph off the ball more like an undersized 2, and maybe have somebody as a on the ball as a point guard, as a distributor. Is that what you're envisioning?
I mean, that could be interesting. Man, I don't know if it would have worked if they had drafted LaMelo Ball, but that is an interesting sliding doors scenario as to whether, because that's a guy with so much talent and he's getting paid $1 billion right now. So I don't know if it would really work, but it hasn't really translated to winning. That would be a situation where it would be Steph completely off the ball all the time. I don't know if it's about off the ball or on the ball. I just think it's more. I think he's getting depleted. I think it was a little underrated how ragged he was, not only in the Kings game, but also just sloppy in the Pelicans game. That was the game that
Yeah.
really doomed them. That
He had 3
Pelicans game.
turnovers in the game. They had battled back. He came in, quickly turned it over 3 times, and that was ball game.
Yeah. And I think that's the sort of thing that happens with age, and then you will preserve more of him and get more out of him if you can just give him help. But yeah, I haven't really thought about how much of it has to be on ball versus off ball. I just think about it in terms of more help.
There's a lot of theories that say that if you're going to move Wiggins, you're going to have to attach assets to get it done because of his contract. But he's in his prime and still can play. And then there's Chris Paul, which they have to opt in for the 30 mil. And then if they opt in, then they could do a trade of his $30 million contract. What do you think? I mean, is there more interest in the league, you think, for Paul and $30 million expiring, or for Wiggins, who's in his prime and theoretically should be able to help any number of teams? He just had, the last couple of years, he's had personal issues and all kinds of things that have taken him away from the game. And I think I'm just tired of watching a guy with, $200 million in the bank play at like 60% speed. It just seems, he just screams out, I'm not going 100%. And that's hard to watch.
Yeah, I mean, there'd probably be more interest in Wiggins just because that cachet of number 1 pick and the fact that he's in his prime, somebody could talk themselves into it. They could talk themselves into getting the kind of rejuvenation that the Warriors got when they got him from the Wolves. But it is frustrating. It is something where you wonder if how they handled him was wrong. I don't want to say it definitively, because unlike back in the day, I'm not around the team all the time. Obviously, I talk to people, but I enjoy a lot of it more like a fan and I watch it. But when I look at how they've indulged these absences of him, of his, and how there almost seems to be a stigma in media where you can't really even ask the players to do anything or fulfill certain responsibilities. And it's very serious personal issue, very serious personal issue. And it's, I mean, you're kind of disappearing for weeks at a time. I mean, this is, you're getting paid a lot of money. I don't want to be glib about whatever you're going through, but you need to be here. And I wonder if by allowing him to do it and shrugging it off and being defensive on his behalf, it might have sent the message that, hey, there aren't really standards here. Hey, this is a little like Minnesota where you can kind of do whatever you want. I've heard that critique, and I think I believe it to a certain extent. I know it's easy for me to say from the outside, but I wonder if they held him to account, if they would be getting better results than they've gotten recently, where it's been loosey-goosey, and there have just been these weird absences that everybody just seems to be okay with, which sends the message to everybody else that what happens here doesn't matter. I just think the way they handled it was very strange. And additionally, to do a bigger media critique, I don't think there was enough in the media of what's going on here, and being critical of it.
3 last Warrior questions, and we'll jump and talk some football. One of my favorite things was kind of the back and forth that you had with Durant. If the Warriors move Kuminga in the deal, could you see a KD Warrior reunion, or is that not happening?
Oh my God. I mean, you never
if Steph
know.
needs another guy, KD's older at this point. I mean, everybody's older at this point. We're all older, but I mean, he's at a different point in his career. Phoenix spent a lot to get him there, but I don't know. I mean, is he there to the finish line, or do you think KD's got another move in him?
I mean, I think it's funny. It wasn't, if we're being totally honest, and if Warriors fans, now they've won in 2022, can be totally honest, it wasn't cool when he came here. It was too decadent. But if he came here again and it actually worked, I feel like that would be kind of cool. And maybe he's in a different place. The thing I mostly remember about it, it wasn't KD going back and forth with me. It was him and Steve. It got really toxic. And if people recall, he was just undermining Steve for fun in the press conferences after the game. He would just say the opposite message of whatever Steve was saying. And I think that relationship was so bad. I think they would have to come back from that and reach some sort of understanding for that to work. But I mean, that would be intriguing. I don't think that would be, I don't know if that's the first option you want to go with as an idea, but I can't dismiss it. Maybe, possibly.
It's so funny you say that because it was so played out as, the fracture was Draymond and KD, but you think it maybe had a little bit more to do with Kerr and KD. I always looked at it as Draymond knew KD was bailing
Yes.
and called him out and was
Yes.
like, basically yanked his sheets and told everybody, hey, look, you're not going to sit there and smile in our face and walk out the door.
Oh,
I'm calling you out. He called him out.
yes.
And that's kind of what happened. I mean, am I reading that right? Or
No, you're reading that 100% right. And it's weird. I sound so defensive on Draymond's behalf. I've written things about Draymond that he hated. He's yelled at me. He's cursed at me. I've had my run-ins, but it's just how I see it. KD was gone. He was gone. And I got some blowback of, you're going to run him out of town and he's sick of the media and that's why he's leaving. And then you hear Draymond ran him out of town when he yelled at him. He was gone. He was done. And I would ask this again and again during that season when fans got mad about it, when you would say, hey, I think he's leaving. When does he ever say anything good about this situation? He never in that season, when he was glum and he was putting on the White Sox hat, said anything good about it. And so that was behind the scenes, something everybody knew. And the reason I had my run-in with him is I just said what everybody was saying in the background. I just said they expect him to leave. That's the expectation. And it was the expectation before Draymond did what he did. Didn't change anything, obviously. he was gone and he was done. I just think the situation did not do for him what he expected it to do. And his being brilliant in those finals and the playoffs, the fact that that didn't really change his standing and his status in the league, that's not what he was in it for. He wasn't looking for that. And when he realized that and fully absorbed it, I think it changed everything.
There's a lot of Warrior fans who believe that Steve Kerr's rotations were messed up this year, that he was playing guys for what they did and not for what they were doing. And what do you think? I mean, Kerr, I love Kerr. I've gotten to know him a little bit through Tommy doing the show on KMBR with Tolbert and having him on regularly. And I really like Kerr. I think Kerr's a tremendous person. But there are people that Warrior fans this year, I mean, he took a ton of abuse, Ethan. It's amazing. And a lot of people feel that Kerr needs to change for the Warriors to win. Do you agree with that sentiment, or is it, does his offense with the ball movement and the body movement, is it outdated? Does he need to embrace the youth more instead of sticking to his trusted veterans? I mean, he came out of that Kings game. We all saw Klay go 0 for 10. The sentiment was like, get Klay the hell out of here. And he's like, Klay's got to be here. And, is he not seeing it the way it needs to be seen? Is his loyalty too great? Give me your assessment of where Kerr needs to go or where he's at.
If you notice, he said that, but then the next day he started talking about how we can't have the most expensive roster ever. And the tune started to change a little bit. So I don't know. Maybe Steve had some conversations with the money men behind the scenes. And I don't know if he would say the same thing today that he said on the podium immediately after the game. Now, I saw Nick Wright had this debate with people on Warriors Twitter about the whole Steve issue, and he was basically telling them, get sane. Trace Jackson Davis minutes are not the difference between contending for a title and not contending for a title. The problem is more structural with the team. And I would agree with that, obviously. But I also think people who are really committed and watch a lot, when they complain, they're not on to nothing. Like, they sense something. I do think the team had a lack of urgency. I do think that some of the young guys should have probably got more minutes. And it's easy to say that all from afar. Does Steve need to change his approach? I think some of the guys should probably get some more minutes, but what's hard for me in critiquing Steve, it would be really easy for me to go, look, this guy, he just didn't give these young guys the minutes they deserve. These guys, they're not getting the investment that they should get. I might want to say that, but all of these young players that people complained about Steve not playing didn't really turn into much. They didn't go. It's not like Patrick McCaw went to the Raptors and became a superstar. So my assumption, this is like the main thing I've learned as just a media member following the league on the ground level versus watching it at home. I would get so mad before I became a beat writer that a guy wasn't playing. And I would go, well, look at his stats. Look at his stats. What are they doing? These idiots, what are they doing? And then when you get in the building and you start talking to people, you start to realize that 90% of the time there's a reason, and it's a good reason. Sometimes the coach and the staffers and everybody paid a lot of money to analyze this stuff. Sometimes they're wrong. But more often than not, there's some sort of reason. He doesn't know the playbook. He gets drunk all the time and is a mess. He didn't show up to practice, whatever it is. And so I guess I'm kind of waffling and giving an in-between answer. I don't think Steve has been completely crazy in his rotations. I do think he should maybe open himself up a bit more to playing the young guys, specifically Moody might be somebody who requires more commitment, but I don't think that he's been doing something that's wildly out of step with what other coaches have been doing, especially when his mandate is win the game in front of me.
Real good one in the chat here from Kevin F. He said, Bob Myers, it doesn't matter if he's 7 feet tall or 8 feet tall, because why bring a player in if they're, meaning the coaching staff, not going to use him? Was there, did Myers leave because of Kerr? Did Myers leave because Joe's a pain in the ass? Or did Myers leave because he
Second
saw
one.
the end coming and he didn't want to be the bad guy and be the guy who had to banish all these players that Bob's not cold. Bob's warm. I
Yeah.
mean, think about most GMs, the greatest GMs in all sports. There's a relative coldness to them. There's a warmth to Bob Myers. Was he too warm of a guy to be there when this thing broke up?
I think that was part of it. And he's advertising that part of it of, oh, I just can't really have that conversation with Klay. And maybe that's the downside of having been a player agent. I think Bob sometimes, if he wanted to make a criticism of a guy who won 4 championships, it would be that he sometimes acted like a player agent when he was the general manager. He was almost like a den mother. He was checking in on everybody too, of like, are you good? Are you good? How are you feeling? And there's a value to that. There's a utility to that. But sometimes maybe you need those harsher standards, like we were talking about with Wiggins, and you need to not act like the guy's friend or somebody who's assisting him in his life. You go, look, this is how it has to be. I think the main reason Bob Myers left the Warriors is the Joe Lacob thing. I really do. I mean, that's what I would hear about all the time. I think it was draining to work for Joe. I think whatever Joe does that drains people probably also helps them be productive. But year after year of that, when you've won 4 championships, at a certain point, you go, get off my back. Maybe you get a little sick of having a boss. And additionally, and this wasn't talked about a lot, I think people don't know what the GM job is like. It's hard for them to envision. Some people think it's like playing fantasy basketball. Some people think it's something else. But Bob did not have staffing power like other general managers in the league would have. Guys who didn't win nearly as much as he did. From what I heard, it was an act of Congress to hire Mike Dunleavy under him, who was his guy, to get that through. So I think there is a sense of, I've had all this success and I'm getting grinded all the time. The job, even though it's a job everybody would want my life. I'm 6'8", have a full head of hair, winning championships. I'm basically working, we're working through June, and then I'm immediately flipping around to the draft and I'm getting burnt out. And I think the lack of power that he got when it came, when he was accomplishing so much, I think it just became too much for him, and he wanted out. I think he was burnt out before he left. I don't think this was some sort of him just leaving everybody with the bill. It worked out that way. I mean, he's exited at the right time, but I do think it was the dynamic with him and Joe. I think that was a huge part of the exit.
Let's finish with Joe. Did Joe make the Wiseman pick?
I don't think Joe made the Wiseman pick. I forgive bad picks from that draft, by the way. I put out a bunch of opinions about that draft, and I didn't know what I was talking about. That was the pandemic year. That was a very weird season to analyze. Everything got paused. I think it screwed up the development of the guys in that draft, because when you look back at it, it's not a good one. It's Anthony Edwards at number 1. It's Halliburton picked way later.
7, right?
And then and then Tyrese Maxey, who was picked way later. I mean, you are likely not winning if you have a pick in that draft. So I think that's a road fork point for the Warriors right there, where sometimes you tank and you get Wemby, and sometimes you tank and you get Wiseman, and they got Wiseman, and that's unfortunate. But I also just think there really weren't a lot of options. It was almost like playing Russian roulette, but the other way, where you've got 5 in you've got 5 in there instead of 1. So, it's an unfortunate outcome. But I didn't get the impression that it was Joe dictating it and that Bob had some grand plan. It's not like Bob was bending my ear and going, I really like this Tyrese Halliburton guy, and they just won't let me draft him. They just won't let me do it. Like that wasn't happening. I think Bob was genuinely impressed by the physicality and the athleticism of Wiseman, who just turned out just didn't really know how to play.
Terrible hands, terrible timing. He was a great paper prospect, and the guy spoke Mandarin or speaks Mandarin. Last one on the Warriors, and we'll jump to the Niners. Who is Joe Lacob? I feel like I don't know anything about Joe Lacob. I mean, like, is Joe Lacob the sentimental guy that wants to go to the finish line with Steph and Klay and Draymond and man, he's all about sentimental, or
No.
and is he about money, or is he motivated by
No.
titles? Because he's always said, "Hey, man, I'll spend the money," but I get the feeling that he's hesitant to see Draymond and Klay and Steph go because there's brand recognition. It's an opulent, expensive arena. The first time I was in it, my first thought was the Warrior business people challenged the Warrior basketball people to maintain a really compelling product because this arena is opulent,
Yeah.
it's expensive, and you're going to have a draw going forward. Do you think he cares more about making that arena profitable and people coming through the turnstiles, or is he more worried about getting that next title?
I mean, his ambition is bigger than that. He wants it. He wants to somehow turn the Warriors into some sort of international brand that will flip to something else. He is not sentimental. I kind of appreciate how unsentimental he is because a lot of people are fake. I don't like Mark Benioff, the tycoon of Salesforce, is
Right.
the type of billionaire that I don't love, where he's always telling you about how he's saving the world and what a good guy he is. And I don't enjoy that. I like that Lacob is just a shark who acts like a shark. And he is such, excuse my language, he is such an asshole, but in a way that amuses me, where I can't even remember. We were having a conversation about his politics. I don't even know how we got on that topic. And he said something like, well, when you make a lot of money, they try to take it from you. And then he said to me, you wouldn't understand. And then he just like walked away before I said anything in response.
That is awesome.
And it was just, that's him. He doesn't even know. He doesn't even know when he's offending people. It's one of the reasons why Ritter, the Warriors PR guru, has to be around him at all times, because he's afraid that this guy is going to grab a microphone and foam at the mouth and start yelling about light years and how he wants to kill all his opponents. So I think the good news for Warriors fans is that he is psychotically competitive. He wants to win. That's huge. That's table stakes, I think, for having a good organization. I think your owner giving a shit is maybe the most important thing for long-term success. There's a lot of ego to it, certainly. And I think he's always had a little bit of discomfort with how much of it has been about Steph. I mean, that's the other thing he said, in addition to the light years comment famously, is it's not just Steph. I don't think it's just about the money. I think the money becomes a bit of a problem for him. He's not one of these Mark Benioff level billionaires. So the luxury tax payments have been a bit of an issue, but I think he wants to win. And maybe the main criticism of him is that the eyes get bigger than the stomach, and he assumes that it's not even cyclical and you can just win a championship, compete forever, never have a downturn, never have a tanking year. And this is the type of thing that Bob Myers felt like he was up against. He was up against unrealistic expectations from the boss man.
Yeah, no, it's he maintains, we will find a way, we will continue to win. But you know what? The Bulls had their run with Jordan and they haven't won since. And NBA dynasties, it's really, really hard to keep it going. And the Spurs kept it going, but they had David Robinson, the Admiral, and then they wheeled that into Duncan, and they had tremendous luck along the way. It's the one thing I will say, and now all the rules are changed to hurt Golden State. You can't buy second round picks. I will say this: they're in an era where the draft is speculative. If there's 60 picks in the draft and there's 15 good players, they don't go 1 through 15 like they did in 1985. They go
Yeah.
1 through 4, and then 12 through 16, and then 32 through 36, and Trace Jackson Davis was picked 57. So if
It's
you
amazing.
really are sharp, I was looking at NBADraft.net. I love this kid, Baylor Shireman. He's like 57th in the draft coming out of Creighton. Zach Edey is like the 7th pick of the second round. I like the two kids from Duke, the kid from Sacramento and the big guy Filipowski. They're like projected in the late 20s. So you know what? It's a speculative draft, and if you have great scouts, and the Warriors seem to, I mean, they've got Pajemski and TJD at 19 and 57 last year.
It's
That
incredible.
maybe there is an avenue to keep it rolling, and I hope they do.
Yeah, and
Um,
Yeah, I
Go
just want
ahead.
to give like one little note of optimism. Two hits in the draft. I mean, they were not getting that kind of luck before. Maybe you say that's the Dunleavy bump, but I don't think Warriors fans are used to that necessarily, of having an infusion of young talent that will grow. I mean, I think Moody also shows a lot as well, but those two guys, those look like hits in the draft, and I'm very intrigued by Jackson Davis. These guys where they're doing it when people don't think they should be able to. They go, "Hey, he's 6'9", he's not a center, but he's doing it." I always think there's a lot of hidden value in guys like that. So I don't know what the ceiling is on a TJD, but I think he's already been undervalued. He was undervalued in the draft. It's not out of the question that people are still undervaluing what he might actually flourish into if time goes on. So that's one guy, especially that I'm watching. I can't tell you that I know he's going to be whatever, but he might have more potential.
The chat, we got this one. It's your boy PK Man OG says Larry, Sacramento Kings blue background. No, the Kings are purple. There we go. There's your Kings. You like Kings? We can switch it to the Kings. And then we got this one because I'm streaming in the morning with Damon Bruce. JJ says, Larry, use that line on Damon Bruce tomorrow during wake up. You wouldn't understand, Damon. You wouldn't understand. You know he would love that. He would absolutely. Damon, we're talking about a layer of wealth that, well, you wouldn't get it.
You wouldn't get it. You wouldn't
All
get
right,
it.
let's, by the way, and what the last 46 minutes and 30 seconds has proven is that Ethan Strauss is maybe the best guest talking Warrior basketball. Some phenomenal stuff there, man. Seriously. And I'm sorry that I dragged you through that much because I know you wanted to talk football, but we will switch it right here and we'll talk some Niner football. Now Ethan's off work and now he's just having some fun. You are, and people maybe don't know this. You're a big Niner fan, and you're really into it. Tell people what level of Niner fan you are. I mean, and is this a new thing? Have you been a Niner fan for years? This is kind of how we connected. You were saying, "Hey, man, you're getting so granular on the Niners throughout the season, and you enjoyed it, and I appreciate that you did. And I'm glad that we connected. But what kind of Niner fan are you? Are you a guy that's going to watch the day 3 of the draft? Are you looking for Matt Barrow's release of the undrafted free agents? How hardcore are you?
Oh, I'm a guy who likes to watch these live streams. I'm a guy who goes, "Oh my God, the coach is on with Larry. Oh, okay, I'm leaning in. I'm very into this. I want to hear what they're going to talk about what the Niners should do in round 6 of the draft." I think it's funny. It kind of started in earnest when the Warriors had that really bad season where Steph got hurt, their tanking season that led to Wiseman, and the Niners suddenly were good and they had Bosa. And I just got hooked. It was like the Warriors stunk, and that gave me a little bit of airspace to really get into the Niners. And because you can't really be a fan of the team that you cover, there are too many professional responsibilities. It was just fun to follow it like a fan, and it's only progressed. I think that they're a really charismatic, interesting team, and they're a team that's fun to debate and talk about. They've had this incredible story with Purdy, and so I'm not the kind of fan who will reminisce about the 90s. I grew up in San Diego. I rooted for the Chargers growing up, but then they they left. So what are you going to do? But as far as what's happening right now, I'm watching all the damn live streams. I'm addicted to this stuff.
Can I tell you my Chargers story? So I'm going to Sac State. I graduated high school in 88. So I went to college 89 through 93. And one of those years for spring break, my buddy Doug, who said, "Hey, my buddy from high school, Kevin, is a football operations intern under Bobby Beathard. And we were going to spring training. We were going to spend a weekend in San Diego and then go to Arizona for spring training. He's like, Kev says if we come down, we can hang out with Bobby Beathard at the in his office there at the Murph." And he's like, "Are you interested in that?" I'm like, "Fuck yeah. I want to meet Bobby Beathard. I love Bobby Beathard." Right. And I love his story, how he has a surfboard in his office, and he's just this hang loose, cool guy, the late Bobby Beathard. And we went down there and spent an afternoon with Bobby Beathard, and then went out to the beach and surfed with Bobby Beathard
Oh, oh
and
my
hung
God.
out. This is like right around now, right? So like he had his draft board up, and he's like, yeah, these are the 3 linebackers we like, and this is, we're looking at these quarterbacks, and and this is how the process works, and this is our war room, and this is who we have in the war room, and this is what we've put into it. And we hung out and went and had lunch, and then went out to the beach and surfed with Bobby Beathard, and it was
What year
amazing. This
and
was
what year was
Rudy
this?
Feldman was their pro personnel guy. He was the guy. He was there. Charlie Joyner was one of their
Oh,
coaches. This
yeah.
was probably 1993.
I'm trying to
They just hired Bobby Ross. This was the year before they met the Niners in the Super Bowl.
I'm trying to figure out who was on that draft board. That's what I was asking. I was like,
Yeah, I mean, I
this isn't
might have been Natron
not the
Means.
it
Natron
wasn't
Means
the
business.
yeah, Rodney Harrison was probably later. Should be in the
Yeah.
Hall of Fame, by the way. Incidentally, Rodney Harrison should be in the Hall
Oh,
of Fame. But
what a hitter! What a hitter
um,
he was. Devastating
and
hitter.
and could snag those interceptions. So yeah, but it's been taken from me. The Chargers have been taken from me. I learned some valuable football. Things about the Chargers inform how I feel about the Niners. That's what I will say. I saw somebody in the chat made a CMC LT comparison. I think as players they're very similar. Christian McCaffrey and LaDainian Tomlinson. And it did give me the sense, having watched the Chargers, big Tomlinson fan, unimpeachable as a player in the way that McCaffrey is, but you just don't want to build your attack around a running back. That was a lesson I took from that period of time with
Didn't he
how
have the
great they were.
migraine? Didn't he have the migraine against the Patriots
So,
when he sat out?
something always goes wrong. 2006, what went wrong is there were crazy turnovers and they didn't give him the ball enough. And Tomlinson blames their offensive coordinator because he thought he was tanking to get a job with the Dolphins, whatever. But, usually the guy gets hurt. He's a running back. He gets hurt, or you fall behind and you can't catch up as easily with a running back. So that definitely completely informs my idea of what the Niners should do. Some of the debates and discussions when people were saying McCaffrey for MVP, I thought that was absurd. I thought McCaffrey is an amazing player, but a running back in this modern NFL should not be the MVP. So it's funny. Like there is a connection point in my mind a bit as to what I watched, what I experienced, and what I should, what I think that the Niners should do.
Let's jump right in on the big, juicy debate in Ninerland going into draft week, and that surrounds Brandon Aiyuk. My kid called me today. I was at my other son's varsity baseball game. He's like, Dad, there's people crushing you with your comments about Aiyuk. And basically, a guy that I stream with tomorrow, a guy named Chase Sr., put out, Chase Sr. from Chat Sports. He covers the Niners and Eagles. He does a real good job. I like him a lot. He put out a report that a Steelers source said he expects Brandon Aiyuk to be a Steeler in 2024, and that the Steelers are expecting to land Aiyuk in a trade. Interestingly enough, Aiyuk's agent then fired back at Chase Sr. instead of the original report that Chase reported from all Steelers, and I forget the guy's name, but a guy from Pittsburgh reported that Pittsburgh is aggressively pursuing an Aiyuk trade, and they would be surprised if they didn't land Aiyuk, which is huge news here in the Bay Area. So instead, this agent for Aiyuk, instead of going back at the guy from all Steelers, goes at Chase Sr. and is like, hey, you better get better sources and this and that. And everybody then just starts piling on Chase Sr. I had retweeted Chase Sr.'s video saying that, I could picture Brandon Aiyuk being traded. And then I was getting hate from Niner fans because Niner fans don't want to hear about their best receiver being traded to the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I get it. And I understood why Chase was getting criticism. And I understand why I indirectly was getting some criticism. And it's really brought this whole story into a full-blown drama. And this all Steelers reported that Pittsburgh's aggressively pursuing an Aiyuk trade, and they would be surprised if they didn't land Aiyuk. Now, Pittsburgh's GM is Omar Khan. He wants a top wide receiver to play opposite George Pickens. Mike Tomlin has not had a losing season in 17 seasons in Pittsburgh, but he also has 0 playoff wins in the last 5 years, and they're eager to get, they've got a great defense with a great pass rush, and they're eager to get their offense cooking. And so they don't want to take a chance in the draft on some speculative rookie receiver. It's like a 50-50 hit rate on receivers in the draft. They want a sure thing. So it makes sense that they want Tomlin. I think the starting point of an Aiyuk trade, since he was a first-round pick, is a first-round pick. He's only 26. He's an all-pro receiver. His best football definitely lies ahead. Steelers own the 20th pick in the first round. Now, interestingly enough, here's Aiyuk's agent didn't say that Aiyuk would not be traded. He never actually refuted the report. And according to a Pittsburgh team source, the trade talks are real and they are ongoing. Now, the agent kind of poo-pooed the whole thing and said, hey, look who you're talking to. I think negotiations between the Niners and Aiyuk are likely not going well. I think Aiyuk wants $30 million a year after 2024. The journalist who originally reported this is not some flimsy guy. He is legit. He is connected to Pittsburgh, and there's a chance that he has an internal source that the agent is not aware of. As far as Aiyuk, if he doesn't want to be a 49er, they can let him walk next year and take the comp pick if they so choose. But you're going to get more right now if you trade him for, if you trade him this year for whatever you can get, that's going to be significantly more than the comp pick that you're going to get in the third round next year if he walks. Pittsburgh, if they wanted to, could wait a full year and sign Aiyuk, who at that point would be about 27 years old if they want. Interestingly enough, Aiyuk's agent, a guy named Ryan Williams, it's obvious that he wants to control the narrative. The oddity in this situation is that Aiyuk's agent, Ryan Williams, and John Lynch are good friends. Lynch was the best man at Williams' wedding. So to me, the key to this whole thing is that the Steelers, there's a lot of talk here that the Steelers don't want to pay Aiyuk 100% of Aiyuk's salary this year. So this is an ongoing probable negotiation. And this reporter, Noah from All Steelers, he may have an internal source, but, why is the agent shutting down these rumors?
It's so weird.
To me, I think the agent, and this is my theory, and tell me what you think. I think the agent is shutting down these rumors because I think John Lynch wants to keep his cards close to the vest. He wants to keep things hush-hush so that he can get the best value for Aiyuk in a trade. They want a round one pick. If it all of a sudden it comes out that, hey, the Niners have cap problems and they have to move Aiyuk, suddenly, Aiyuk, the value of Aiyuk goes way down. Interestingly enough, Aiyuk tweeted directly at Mike Tomlin a couple of weeks ago, which fueled this speculation to begin with. So we all know the Niners are in a salary cap pinch. We all know that they don't want the rest of the league to think that they have to trade Aiyuk. It's a deep wide receiver class. They may be looking at a wide receiver to replace him. And I think ultimately, if Aiyuk wants $30 million, and that's probably too pricey for the Niners' budget, they likely have to trade Aiyuk, and they can get more if the rest of the NFL general managers think that the Niners actually have options. And I think that's why they're trying so desperately to control this narrative. But everybody's taking off on Chase Sr. and myself and anybody who's suggesting that this trade is going on and just forgetting that the agent's job is not to tell the truth. The agent's job is to make sure it all works out. And there's a relationship between Ryan Williams, the agent, and John Lynch. So they may be working in cahoots to try to protect the Aiyuk trade value going into draft week. I know I just talked for 5 minutes, but this to me is very juicy, very interesting. And if you made me wager, are they going to trade him or not trade him? I probably would say they're going to trade him. I don't know.
Man.
There's
Okay,
a
so I
lot
want to
there.
start.
There's a lot there.
There's a lot there. There's a lot there. First will be a point about one of the reasons you've been successful relative to radio, which is dying. And it's this. I understand that 95.7 and KMBR are inclined to talk about the teams that are actually playing right now. I get it. But there are probably 10 times as many people in the Bay Area who want Niners offseason content as whatever is happening with those other teams. I feel like you could do something on Aiyuk every day. I think the situation is very interesting and potentially toxic, but for that relationship with the agent and John Lynch, because you look at the elements of it. Here's something that I don't think is getting talked about enough. I think that Aiyuk is not valued around the league and by fans in general at the level of his production. That's fair or unfair. I think that's the case. I saw, Devontae Smith gets that contract. What was it? Was it 25 a year that he got? I'm trying to remember what it was. And
I don't know what he got, but Aiyuk's going to get more. Yeah.
Well, that's the assumption, but I don't know if most football people think that Aiyuk is a hotter commodity than Smith, which is why I think this is potentially toxic. It's that Aiyuk he's done the dirty work too as a blocker, right? And his yards per catch, which he really cares about. That was the moment when I started to get a little bit, maybe trade this guy, is when he was on Shannon Sharp's thing. He was complaining about playing the last game of the season and it dropped his YPC to, I guess, the second. But he's put up these great stats, but I think it's something about Shanahan is part of it, where Aiyuk is not somebody I'm watching fans covet. I'm not watching these fan bases. Maybe there's some Steeler fans out there I don't know about him saying, oh my God, let's get this guy. Maybe they're wrong and they underrate all the good things he brings to the table. He's an excellent route runner, but he's just not one of these flashy guys that it appears teams covet. I think if you look at that game plan that the Chiefs had against the Niners, you would not find a lot of, oh my God, they changed everything for Brandon Aiyuk, right? There was that whole cliche, annoying conversation people had about quarterbacks. Are they game changers or are they game managers, right? That dumb conversation. The funny thing about that dumb conversation, that whole thing with Cam Newton, the funny thing about that conversation is it might be more applicable to wide receivers, because I don't think that Aiyuk really changed the game as far as what Spagnuolo did. When you hear the interviews with Spags, he's talking about things he was worried about. He doesn't really talk about Aiyuk. He's not scared. They didn't change what they were doing really to account for him in the way that you would do with a Justin Jefferson, the way you would certainly do for a Tyreek Hill. So if Aiyuk wants to get that kind of money, I don't think he's valued at that level. The problem is then, well, who's going to trade for him around the league if he's not valued at that level? So I think it's the situation that's potentially toxic, because he's produced at a certain level and the respect hasn't even really come, even if he did get all pro. And I'm just not sure that there's that strong a market for him, but for one of these situations that we're talking about, where if we don't produce right now, I'm going to get fired. Bulky, I'm going to get fired in Jacksonville if I don't produce right now. Tomlin, it's now or never. Like, these are the situations where you can maybe do it. So it just seems like it might be a drier market for him than the statistics would indicate, because he's not. And now I'm monologuing for a while. I just find the whole situation super interesting. I if you're Aiyuk, you're probably also nursing these resentments, because he's probably thinking, I saved the season. He didn't just save the season. People point to that bounce off the guy, should have been an interception catch in Detroit, but also that catch he had at the end in the rain in Green Bay, where he was diving on that final drive, was huge. So Aiyuk's a weird player. It just seems like he's a professional. He does everything technically soundly. He doesn't drop passes for the most part. And how much do you value a receiver who does everything right? But if you look at that Detroit play, if you look at that play against the Lions, what do you see on that play? It's a bit of a Rorschach test. You see a guy making an incredible play after it bounced off the DB. But what you also see is a guy who did not get on top of him on the route because he's not a burner like that. And the DB was farther back than he was, which is why the play happened in that way. When with a faster guy, he might have just caught the ball without all the ricochet. So I'm kind of with you, Larry. I mean, who knows? I'm just some sort of dumbass Niner fan. I'm not somebody with a professional connection. But when you talk about them trading him, I think that's probably the route that this might lead to, because he is just not going to feel like he's made whole by the situation. So,
And you know what? Here, and I do understand the pushback against Chase and against myself, because it's like walking at the front of Disneyland and yelling, Mickey Mouse is a fraud, or, they're trading Donald Duck, and people are like, no, we love Donald Duck. And it's people love Aiyuk. And then then people get real simplistic, like, well, I'd rather move Debo. Yeah, well, Debo's not worth a number one pick. Where Aiyuk probably is. And, and if you're the agent, it's like, well, why is the agent crapping? He could have refuted the story. The agent could have come out and said, Brandon Aiyuk is not going to be traded. But instead, he's kind of like attacking people who are talking about this, because I think John Lynch, at the end of the day, is buddies with this guy. And I think they'd love it all to be kind of hush-hush going into the draft, because I think John would like it to be known that they don't have to trade Aiyuk, and that they could trade him to any number of teams. And there's a negotiation going on, and some of it's involved with probably draft pick compensation. Some of it's maybe involved with how much of the money of the contract of Aiyuk this year is actually paid. And I just think that the agent's trying to maintain, the agent wants to get his commission. So if the Niners can't pay him, let's say he wants $30 million, and Parag Marate says, you know what, our budget's 24. Okay, so you're $6 million over our budget, and we're going to have to move you, or we're going to have to just let you sit for a year and then collect a third round pick at the end of the year, which is going to be uncomfortable for everybody, because he's going to be sitting there. You didn't take care of him. Players are going to be asked about it. Why didn't you take care of him? It will be a distraction. So if you're the agent, you either want the Niners to pay him what he wants, the $30 million, or you would love it if the Niners traded him to another team, because if that team then trades a number one pick, they're over a barrel, and they have to pay him whatever he's worth, because they just gave away a first round draft choice to get the guy. So now your chances of getting your ask, let's say it's 30 million, go considerably up if he gets dealt, because that team's now invested assets in acquiring him, and you now hold more leverage. So I see all these different things working. I don't know how it's going to shake out. If you ask me to wager on it, I would wager that Adam Schefter came out, and Ethan, and said Brandon Aiyuk wants to make the money more than he wants to stay with the Niners. He would love to do both. He'd love to stay on a Super Bowl contender and make it 30 million. But if it comes down to, do you want 30 million and play for Team X, or do you want, 24 million and play for the Niners? He wants his 30 million. History shows NFL wide receivers get one big bite at the apple, and this is his opportunity. He knows it. So he wants to take that big bite, and it's okay if it's in LA with the Chargers, or if it's in Jacksonville with the Jags, or the Pittsburgh with the Steelers, New England with the Patriots. He wants, big money. Now, while this is going on, the betting favorite in Vegas, because you can bet on all this stuff, for Brandon Aiyuk's next team are the Pittsburgh Steelers at plus 200. They're 2-1. They are big favorites to be the landing spot for Brandon Aiyuk. So now you got a reporter coming out saying, I've got a source saying they think he's going there. You've got the betting favorite being the Steelers. To me, it really looks like he's probably going to wind up in Pittsburgh. And then now the debate is, how much of his contract do the Niners pay this year? Do they pay a lot of it and get a high compensation? Do they pay a very little of it and get a lower compensation? I think that's probably what we're looking at. And I think this was squashed by Williams, partly because he's working in cahoots with Lynch, and they want the perception league wide to be, the Niners have options. They can keep them, they can move them. They don't want to be, hey, they're over a barrel on the cap and they have to give them away. They don't want that perception. And I think the agent kind of pushed back on that today. So that's my read on it.
Yeah, because it's weird. It's weird for him to push back on it. And it's smart of you to then go, okay, what's behind this? Because ordinarily, if he wasn't friends with Lynch, you would just go, this is good. If there's more buzz that a team wants my guy, then there's more of a market for my guy, and somebody will maybe want to pay him a lot. That's ordinarily what an agent would think. So it's a very strange pushback. And it does seem like if they get a number one for him, they almost got to do it, just because this market again is perhaps a little drier than what you might think for a receiver who's produced like he's produced. But it's also a situation where there are so many receivers who look good in this draft, and the Chiefs just won a Super Bowl without any really touted receivers.
Yeah,
because a receiver can change the game. Tyreek Hill does change the game, but when the quarterback drops back, most times there's going to be a guy who's open, and it's not going to be because of anything remarkable that he did. He's just the guy who happens to be open, especially as teams have moved more into doing zone defense. I know the Chiefs went man up, but in the second half of that Super Bowl, but it just seems like maybe receiver is one of those flashy positions that tempt you into paying for it. But when it comes to the nuts and bolts of what actually wins you Super Bowls, it's elsewhere, and it's in the trenches. So I feel, look, I love Aiyuk. He's clutch. Again, if he drops that pass against Green Bay, it might be a totally different story. They might not even get there. They probably don't get to the Super Bowl. It's uncomfortable to have that guy taken away from Purdy at this point. But just in terms of value, in terms of the money, they've gotten, they haven't exactly negotiated. I know they tried to negotiate hard, but Bosa got a lot out of them, right? They've spent a lot of money on a lot of guys. It just seems like this is the uncomfortable, and the way they say that democracy is the worst, is the best of the worst systems, or the best of bad systems. This might be like that, where this isn't exactly what you want to do. But if you actually think Purdy is going to be here, it's ironic, right? Because everyone's saying that if Purdy's your guy, you have to have his favorite target. You might think the other way. If you really believe in Purdy, if you really think Purdy's the guy, then you think he's going to be here maybe for 10 years. And if that's the case, maybe you try to build something sustainable and you don't buy into all the noise that they have to make it happen right now and mortgage the future. So I just, once again, I could listen to Bay Area radio talk about this all day, but they don't talk about it on your channel, which is why people come to your channel.
Well, and it, I think your game changer, game manager, I think that drawing the comparison to wide receiver, I think you might be hitting on something. They may view Brandon Aiyuk as a very good wide receiver, but not a true game changer, which leads me to the next quick topic. And we're already an hour and 13 minutes in. We won't take too much more of your time, but this was interesting. Bill Barnwell, do you know Bill Barnwell at all?
I've never met him. Obviously, I've read his stuff for years and years, but I know, I am aware of Bill Barnwell, is what I will say.
Very smart guy, and he has an article out today on ESPN.com. And in his mock draft, he does a mock draft, but he does a mock draft in which every team has to be involved in a trade. And he puts together 32 trades. And it's pretty interesting. The one he had for the Niners was, I thought, riveting. Okay, he's got the 49ers trading Brandon Aiyuk, the 31st pick in the first round, their first round pick, and a third round pick to the Los Angeles Chargers for a 6th round pick and the 5th pick in the draft. And the Niners taking Malik Nabers, the dominant wide receiver from LSU.
Oh my God.
This is a blockbuster. Now, Chargers have absolutely nothing at wide receiver. They got rid of Mike Williams. They got rid of Keenan Allen. Their first round pick last year had the case of the drops. The Chargers have the 5th most cap room of any team in the NFL now. And you look at Brandon Aiyuk, in a lot of ways, I could see him being a very popular guy with Jim Harbaugh. Why? Because he's a wide receiver that blocks in the run game, and he's kind of a
Hmm.
he's not a diva wide receiver. He's a blocker in the run game, and I
Hmm.
could see Jim wanting to have a dominant blocker. We also have been, if you know Jim Harbaugh, he doesn't want to build. He wants to go to the Super Bowl this year.
Yeah.
And rookie receivers are kind of a 50-50 deal in the NFL. 50% of the guys become good, the other 50 crap out. Um, to me, this is really interesting. Would you trade Brandon Aiyuk, your first round pick, and a third round pick for the fifth pick in the draft and a sixth rounder and take Malik Nabers immediately? Yeah, you don't have your number one pick, but you do have the best, most explosive wide receiver in the draft, in my opinion. I like Nabers more than Harrison even. You do have a dynamic guy who's going to be on a rookie contract for, the next 4 years or whatever. You kind of solve your cap problem. You move off of Aiyuk, you get a dynamic young weapon that can be your foundation piece. Would you make that trade? Would you make that trade if you're the Niners? Would you trade Aiyuk 31 and a third for Malik, the fifth pick for Malik Nabers and a 6th-round pick? Would you
Whew.
do it?
I think off the top of my head, yeah. But now I also just want to look at all the available options because I haven't even been setting my sights that high. It hasn't even been really theoretically possible. And I'm wondering, do I want to go with Neighbors or do I buy into this hype of you don't need to go elite wide receiver to win a Super Bowl? And there are a lot of great wide receivers in this draft. Maybe I can snag a guy in the later rounds, possibly. And I mean, that it just gets interesting. I think I'm just a little bit too addicted to the draft, Larry, where if you give me more options, then I'm going to jump at that. But yeah,
Well, let's just say that, the top of the draft is probably going Caleb Williams 1, Jaden Daniels and Drake May 2, 3, 3, 2. We're not sure. Cardinals are probably going to draft Marvin Harrison out of Ohio State, number 4. And that
yeah.
leaves the Chargers with the fifth pick. You could have Roma Dunze. I'm not a huge
Mm,
Roma Dunze fan. I think
not
Michael
totally
Penix
sold.
made him look better. Then you got Malik Nabers. And then you also have the number 1 offensive tackle, in Joe Alt. You could go premier left tackle if you wanted to, with
That's
Joe
where my
Alt,
mind went.
or you could go wide receiver in Malik Nabers. The interestingly enough, the Niners did this. They had, DeForest Buckner. They traded him to Indy for the 13th pick or whatever it
Ca-
was, and took
Can
Javon
I
Kinlaw, and it didn't work
can I
out.
throw out a crazy one?
Sure.
What about Bowers? What about Bowers there? I have a
Brock
theory.
Bowers, you could get a great
I
tight end.
Well, I have a theory that tight end is not appropriately valued. When we see these Super Bowl teams and Super Bowl contending teams, they almost always have a great tight end. For whatever reason, the league just values wide receivers more. I mean, they get nearly twice the money tight ends get, but then that's more value to having a great tight end. Additionally, the bust rate on tight ends drafted in the first round is really high. That sounds scary, except Bowers seems like the rare, just can't miss tight end.
And he's a
Where
Bay
it's
Area kid. He's from Napa.
he's a Bay Area kid. I know Kittle is getting older. I think one of the utilities of a tight end, or one of the advantages actually, is that when they're great, they can play for a while. So I don't want to skip ahead to Kittle being cooked, but I like the idea. If we talk about Brock Purdy as an over the middle guy, and we look back to that devastating attack the Patriots had before Aaron Hernandez killed a guy with the two great tight ends, I'm very intrigued by that having Kittle and Bowers, I'm not wedded to any particular option right there. If you had a pick in that range, I'd want to look at it. I'd want to think about it, but I might not go Neighbors. I know the league values receivers more. I might go Bowers just because he seems so dynamic, and it's a position that I don't think gets its just due. And I think that actually might fit the skill set between the numbers, Brock Purdy, to go in that direction. more so than going wide. So that's just a thought I throw out there.
Well, it's an interesting thing. And then, if the Niners really were moving off of Aiyuk, you could, and they could get that high, technically, you could then start trading down the board and accumulating more picks, and you might actually be able to really, kind of win. As far as
Yeah.
get the player that you want, Brock Bowers, maybe you get him at 14, and you've made 2 or 3 trades to move, down the board after you moved up using Aiyuk to get it done. Lots and lots of scenarios are going to be floated in the next 10 days. We know that for sure. Is there a player in this draft that you just love? Like for me, I'm a big Blake Corum fan. I know they don't need Corum, but I see Emmitt Smith. I see a great running back with tremendous will. I see a real winner. I love him. I love Michael Hall, the center, the nose guard or the defensive tackle from Ohio State. And I love Zach Frazier, the center from West Virginia. He's got the wrestling background at 4.0 GPA, killer film. Those are kind of 3 of my favorite players in the draft. Do you have a favorite player or one that you're really eyeing in this draft, Ethan?
It's funny because I love the center out of Oregon, Jackson Powers, because just the speed and the violence, and there just seems to be a lot of utility or versatility, I should say, where you can put him in different positions. So I enjoy that guy. I'll tell you what, you've made me a convert on Muhammad Kamara. I mean, what
defensive
round is
end
that
from
guy
Colorado
supposed to go?
State. Well,
Yeah,
they're
what
saying,
round is?
I've seen as low as the 5th round. I've seen as high as the late 2nd round. To me, he's a dominant defensive end, edge rusher who, if he's 6'1" and change, if he was 6'3" and change, I think he's like
Yeah.
the 15th or 18th pick in the draft. He's one of the most productive players in all of college football. The guy is a crazy athlete, unbelievable bend, tremendous motor, and really almost unmatched production. And to me, I think height is one of the more overrated elements of being a great defensive end. You're not batting down that many passes. It's about what kind of speed and acceleration and can you get your body parallel to the ground, and do you have great hand usage? Do you have strength? Do you have tenacity? Do you have a motor? He's got all those things. I'm a huge Muhammad Kamara fan.
I mean, I like production, namely. That's the first thing. I know there are guys where maybe they didn't produce statistically, and maybe something about them was overlooked or scheme or whatever. But I just that's something I love. I love when I pull up Kamara's stats in these last 2 seasons where he's got 16 tackles for a loss, 8.5 sacks in 2022, and then last year 17 tackles for a loss, 13 sacks in 12 games. And when you watch him, he's just so quick. And I'm not saying he's going to be Hassan Reddick, but I see similarities there. And it's bizarre to me that you would get a guy like that with that sort of potential that low in the draft. I know that's a guy where if the Niners picked him, I would be very excited and very intrigued about him and Bosa. And I also just think when it comes to pass rushers, those guys are a little bit easier to hit on. I mean, I think that, for lack of a better way of putting it, I think the more thinky positions are the ones that you usually have busts. Those are the ones that are harder to predict a little bit, where it's more about what you got to keep track of. That might be why tight ends, it hasn't been as a reliable hit rate as other drafts. But the guys where your job is, kill a quarterback, those guys are usually fairly predictable. And Kamara's production and what I've seen on film, I love that guy. I'd be very excited if they got him.
Yeah, no, he's got a pro body and unbelievable production and great motor. My guess is that and from what I was talking to Brian Baldinger the other day, and he said lots of teams around the NFL love Muhammad Kamara, which is surprising because you're talking about a Colorado State. He's playing. There aren't that many high draft picks coming out of Fort Collins, but a lot of people love Kamara. All right, last one. We'll finish with this. We're about an hour and 24 minutes in. 90 minutes is a perfect amount of time. So we'll just finish in the last 5 minutes. if you're, let's say they don't make the trade with the Chargers, and they aren't going to trade Aiyuk, they're going to re-sign Aiyuk, because there's a lot of people that think that's going to happen. What do you want to do at 31? You want to go offensive tackle?
Ooh.
You want to go best offensive lineman? You want to go defensive tackle? I mean, they lost Eric Armstead. They replaced him with, Malik Collins and Jordan Elliott. Some people would say they still need a great interior player. Do you want to go linebacker? Do you want to go receiver? They may need a safety. That's probably too high for safety, but position wise or individual wise,
This
is
is
there
a bigger
somebody that you're rooting for at 31?
Yeah. That's sort of a bigger conversation. It's one of the reasons why I'm interested in the draft in the NFL is that I don't know if the league is right about what it values. And
Mhm.
safety, that's one of those where they seem to get short shrift a little bit. And I don't know if that should be true. I think a great safety can have so much impact on the game because of all the decision making. You're more into cornerbacks than I am. I'm less into corners. I feel like that's obviously it's great to have a great cornerback, but I'm not shocked that the Chiefs got off of Snead. I guess it's funny. I'm singing the gospel of receivers overvalued, receivers overrated, but I can't resist the allure, Larry. I can't resist looking at some of these receivers, and even if you have Aiyuk, I just want to change the offense in some capacity. That's what I'm trying to do. And I don't know if these tackles who are down there in the late 30s can change the offense, but I do think that some of these receivers, you could get a burner, a guy who has more speed and can get on top of these routes than Aiyuk can. So I know you don't like Troy Franklin. I know Troy Franklin might not be able to block worth a damn with his spindly body, but he's another guy where at least he produced. At least he put up numbers out there at Oregon. So yeah, that's a guy I like. And I almost wondered, I got a little excited when he looked so terrible at the combine. I thought, okay, he could slip, he could fall. That's just that's a guy I like who you don't like, who I wouldn't hate if they picked is Troy Franklin.
I have Michael James, flashbacks from the Super Bowl. So the Oregon guys I have to be extra convinced on the Oregon guys. Cooper DeJean's another interesting one. I mean,
I'd like that. I've heard too many things
he's an
about.
impact guy.
Yeah, yeah, and he's
Yeah.
a guy where what I like about DeJean, Larry. We talk about changing football and having a game changer. I love Spags defense. I love the stuff they do. And I love the interchangeability of cornerback and safety in that defense. And I think
Yeah.
that's where the league is going to be headed in the way that the Warriors changed things with Draymond switching positions. I remember when Peyton Manning went against the Patriots and Peyton Manning would study things so carefully, he knew where everything was. And they had Rodney Harrison, and we're bringing this full circle as we mentioned him earlier, take some plays at cornerback, and they put Ty Law, I think it was Ty Law back then, at safety. It just screwed up Peyton's brain. He started throwing picks. I like when I hear that a guy like DeJean can play corner and also some safety, and I would be enticed by the possibilities of something like that. I know he ran the 40 enough to sort of protect his status as a cornerback. I'm trying to remember, it might have been a 4.4 or something in that range. I've just heard
He had
too
a
many
good
good
workout.
things about him. Yeah,
Nah,
I've heard too many good things.
Big play guy, and he might be a safety, he might be a corner, he might be a nickel, but he's a tremendous football player for sure. Last one, we're talking football and the draft's coming up. We have to get your thoughts on the quarterbacks. There may be 6 quarterbacks that go in round 1, and to me, if you said predict how it's going to go on Thursday night, round 1, I think there's a chance, and this is going to be kind of interesting, that we may sit there from whatever time the draft starts, 5 o'clock to 8:30 or 9 o'clock, and it may get to the Niners at 31, and they may wind up trading out of the first round. Why? Because if teams that want those quarterbacks usually want that 5th year option. and you get it if you draft a guy in the first round. You don't get it if you draft a guy in the second round. So Caleb Williams is going number 1 to the Bears. A lot of people think Jaden Daniels is going number 2 to the Commanders. Maybe, Drake May's going to number 3. It might be to the Giants. It might be to the Patriots. We'll see. A lot of people say J.J. McCarthy may even go 4 overall, which I'm a little surprised by. But the 2 guys that we don't really know about are Bo Nix from Oregon, who started at Auburn, and then his dad played quarterback at Auburn, and then he started at Auburn and then transferred to Oregon, and Michael Penix, who started at Indiana, had some injuries, and then finished up at Washington. I personally love in this draft Penix.
Yeah.
More than Nix, more than McCarthy, more than the top 3 guys. I look at this quarterback class and I like Michael Penix, and I kind of like a sleeper guy from Western Kentucky, Austin Reed, on day 3. I'm not, Bill Belichick went on with Pat McAfee the other day, and he said, you know what? Quarterbacks are a 50-50 proposition in the first round. And I thought Trey Lance was going to be great. I thought Zach Wilson was going to be great. Look at that draft. Lance, so far, bust. Zach Wilson, bust. Trevor Lawrence has not been good. Mac Jones is now with the Jaguars as Trevor Lawrence's backup. Justin Fields is now with the Steelers. Those 5 guys, you can make an argument they may all be busts. Now, I think Lawrence will not be a bust. But
I don't want to interrupt, but it's like, I don't think it's been 50-50. I think last 10 years, it's like it's trending 20%, but continue. Sorry for the interjection.
No. It's totally true. It's like picking quarterbacks. It's like everybody knows what they like when they see it, but nobody knows how to transition from the college prospect to the pro and what's important and what's not. So of the quarterbacks, and there may go 6 in round 1, Williams, Daniels, May, McCarthy, Nix, and Penix. Who do you like the most out of that group?
It is funny. I heard Chuck Klosterman on with Bill Simmons, and he was saying that maybe the way to do this is to get your team set up and then get your franchise quarterback, which nobody does. Everybody starts with the franchise quarterback, and they get wrecked and overwhelmed by having to be the savior of the team, and it doesn't work out. So the obvious caveat is that situation is big here. I like Penix. He just throws a beautiful ball. I know it looks weird because it's lefty, but I think I know this isn't the criteria, how good it looks, right? That's not really what we're talking about here, but he just seems like a great quarterback. I also like that Penix likes and respects Purdy. That gives him points in my mind. I saw him catching some flack about that when he was asked about what quarterbacks do you watch, what quarterbacks do you like? And I tend to think guys on the West Coast, kind of Pac-12, who aren't playing at USC, tend to get a little bit underrated. They're out of the time zone. And so I think that there's value there. So I like me some Penix. I'd probably go with him. I've got doubts about Williams. I do.
I do too.
I know that
I do too.
And I know the situation is great. He's in such a good situation relative to other guys who are drafted number 1, because he's not being drafted to a last place team, and they do have some pieces, right? So part of me thinks, come on, you idiot, do not voice your issues with Williams because he's so talented. And in this situation, oh my God, it's so much better and he's in the right spot. But I mean, whenever I would watch him, obviously I would see the incredible stuff he does and the highlight plays. But a lot of what I saw was him trying to make highlight plays. And I think people who watched a lot of him know what I mean, where he would just run around and risk taking sacks. And it looked like he was trying to put some up for Instagram. And I don't know. It's weird. You're expecting this guy to save the Chicago Bears, but he couldn't save USC. And I know that people would say the defense wasn't good, but I mean, their recruiting classes have to be incredible at USC. And statistically, last season, he might have, as far as his production, and I know that's not fair because there are systems and there are other players, but the QBR, I think he might have been 4th in the Pac-12. I know the year before was better. So I just think because of the incredible talent, and there's a bit of a similarity to Patrick Mahomes in the movement, and I mean, the arm talent's incredible. Some of the stuff he improvises, amazing. But a lot of what wins games or loses games is the simple stuff. And I just wonder about that, if that's something that he's really drilling down on. And when a guy takes a lot of sacks, I think that concerns me. I think sacks and fumbles are underrated defects in a quarterback because everybody looks at touchdown, interception, completion percentage. Those things are important, but a sack is bad. And that's a huge difference when the guy takes a lot of sacks. I know that's been an issue for him. So I'm less positive about him, rubber stamp number 1 pick than other people. That's my take.
Yeah. It's funny, I'm getting ready to purge my my DVR because this is the one time of the year that I need DVR space because I'm going to record the entire draft, the first round, the entire second round, the entire day 3. So I mean, everything that's non-essential has to go. So I'm going through it this afternoon. I'm like, all right, I don't need this game and this Warrior game that I thought was so cool that I was going to watch forever. I'll purge that and I'll purge this, and I'm getting rid of all this stuff. So I see I've got last year's draft on there. And I'm like, oh, I'm definitely purging last year's draft. I don't need that anymore. So I flip it on for a minute and I start watching it. And I'm like, I'll watch for 10 minutes or so. And sure enough, it's Louis Riddick on ESPN giving a soliloquy about how Bryce Young is perfectly positioned because of the coaching staff, because of all the different support systems they have in Carolina, to not just be drafted, but to hit the ground running and be really, really good. The entire coaching staff got fired. They went 2-15. Bryce Young completed 58% of his passes with 11 touchdowns and 10 picks. And yet Louis Riddick had this coach, and he's got Frank Reich, and he's got this guy, and he's got this offensive coordinator, and this guy is the quarterback coach, and this is why it's going to go so smoothly, and this is why this guy's better than anybody else. Look at now, here we are 1 year later exactly. CJ Stroud is the hottest name in the NFL. He went next. The Panthers clearly missed on their guy. They fired the coach, fired a lot of those guys, and went 2-15, and are now in the midst. Now they don't even know if Bryce Young's even really the guy. It just goes to show. And Brian Billick said it to us on KMBR 1 year, and I remembered it. And he's like, it's the truest thing that anybody's ever said. It's like we have a hard time understanding what is the quarterback as opposed to what's going on around the quarterback. And it's the hardest position to evaluate. Everybody knows they're a good one when they see one, but it's really hard to project.
I don't know. I don't know. After a year of watching people talk about Brock Purdy, I don't know if people do know a good one when they see one. That seems to be it seems to be something that people need to catch up to. But I think it's these positions where it's between the ears. That's just harder to project. It really is. And there's more of a fail rate with it. And we don't know completely what we're looking for. And
it comes down to the nerve too. It's like somebody compared playing quarterback in the NFL to trying to like work on a highway where you got cars going 55 miles an hour, all around you. Some guys can operate in there and stay calm. Other guys get a little skittish and they don't quite ever feel comfortable. Purdy clearly, I mean, that Zach Wilson is not good because he wasn't good in a muddy pocket. Brock Purdy plays in a muddy pocket, and it's not like it bothers him that guys are around him, and he can still keep his eyes down the field and focus and concentrate. It's, it's hard to even find who's good at that. I mean, it's hard to project that.
It's hard. I mean, did you see Logan Ryan? I think he was on with Cowherd, and he was talking about Purdy and the way they feel about him in the building, which I don't think is discussed enough, that Kyle Shanahan loves this guy. Yeah, a couple days ago. And he brought up, it was funny. It was a funny thing to bring up, but the Ravens game where he kept
throwing it in the fourth quarter. He wasn't deterred. Yeah.
No, he wasn't deterred. And those sorts of moments, I do think for other guys can become road fork moments where things are slipping, things are going wrong, and you turtle and you're never the same guy after that. That doesn't seem to be the case with this guy. He came in, he got thrown into the mix in that Dolphins game when Garoppolo got hurt, and he just looked cool and confident from day one. I think Niner fans who really watch, they know this and they have an appreciation for it. And so you might see bad games from him. Things might go wrong. But to me, he's like a pilot. He's like a pilot personality where just not too high, not too low, not an exciting personality, but somebody when the plane is going down, you would want him in there because you trust him to be calm and be confident in what he's doing. And I think something like that, how do you know what a guy is going to respond with when he's at the next level and he just threw 2 picks in a game? You know, how do you know what he's going to be after that? I think that's a very hard thing to predict. Very hard until you see it.
Does he crater? How does he react to that? You're absolutely right. Ethan, awesome stream, man. I love talking hoops with you. I love talking Niners with you. Tell people where they can find everything that you're putting out there into the public, as far as, you know, everything you're writing, and where's the best places to, you know, take in all that you're putting out there.
Well, thanks so much. It was completely my pleasure, Larry. House of Strauss. That's my newsletter. I talk about a lot of open secrets in media, a lot of stuff in sports media that everybody knows, but people are too scared to say. I put it behind the paywall, and I talk about it there. And we've been growing for years, and it's gone really well. So I'd encourage people to check that out. I'm also putting up the podcasts I do at House of Strauss on my YouTube channel, House of Strauss. I'm not going to be a YouTube god like Larry over here, but I'll dip my toe in there. And this has just been a real pleasure, man. Thanks so much for having me on.
Oh man, you're the best. Thanks to our sponsors, Pig and a Pickle, Marin Auto Glass, Underdog Fantasy, and Sharp Corners, Sports Cards and Collectibles. Thanks to everybody in the chat. Thanks to Ethan. Hope you guys enjoyed this. Have a great night, everybody. Peace.
Yeah, never met a man I've been scared of. Careful, you gon' get exactly what you